Think about that for a second. You've got money, power, connections, the kind of resources most people only dream about. You've flown in specialists from 3 different continents. You've sat in the finest medical offices in the world listening to doctors with decades of experience explain, in very technical language, why your child is going blind and there is absolutely nothing anyone can do about it. And then a 10-year-old boy in a faded yellow t-shirt walks up to you in a public park, no appointment, no credentials, no reason in the world why you should listen to him, and tells you the doctors are wrong. Not just wrong. Lying. Would you hear him out? Or would you wave him off, call your security, and go right back to trusting the people in the expensive offices? Because here's the thing. The answer to that question? It was the difference between life and death. And this is the story of a father who almost made the wrong choice. Lagos in the afternoon is not a gentle place. The sun comes down hard and flat, turning the city into something that feels less like a metropolis and more like a furnace. But in one of the city's quieter parks, away from the noise of traffic and the hustle of the streets, a man sat on a simple park bench and felt absolutely none of it. His name was Jeremiah, Jerry to the people who knew him well, and he was the kind of man whose name carried serious weight in this city. Built a real estate empire from scratch. The kind of guy boardrooms fell quiet for when he walked in. Victoria Island's power players knew his face. So did the street vendors on the corner who'd watched him rise. None of that meant anything right now. Because sitting next to him on that bench was his 7-year-old daughter Maya, wrapped in a designer cardigan despite the humid air, her small hands gripped tight around a white mobility cane. Every single time Jerry looked at that cane, it hit him like a punch to the chest. For 6 months, Maya's world had been going dark. Slowly, cruelly, without warning. He'd done everything a man with his resources could possibly do. Flown in eye specialists from London, from Dubai, from anywhere a phone call could reach. They all sat across from him with the same careful expressions and delivered the same verdict. Pediatric macular degeneration. A condition attacking the central part of the eye, progressively, relentlessly. Genetic, they suggested. Environmental, possibly. Nothing to be done except manage the decline. Jerry had nodded in those offices. He'd signed the checks and filled the prescriptions and thanked the doctors politely. And then, in the middle of the night when the house was quiet and his daughter was asleep down the hall, he'd lie awake with a feeling he couldn't shake. A cold, deep dread that had nothing to do with medicine. This didn't feel like a disease. It felt like something intentional. He pushed the thought away every time it surfaced. That kind of thinking was paranoia. That was a man too exhausted to think straight. He had no evidence, no reason, nothing to point at. So he sat on a park bench in the afternoon heat and watched his daughter stare blankly toward a group of pigeons she could no longer see. "Daddy," Maya whispered, her voice small and fragile. "Is it getting dark already?" It was barely 2 in the afternoon. Jerry pulled her close and kept his voice steady. "Just a big cloud passing over, Princess. I'm right here." That's when he noticed the boy. He was maybe 10 years old, standing at the edge of the path about 20 feet away. No plastic bowl extended for money. No water sachets to sell. Just standing there, watching, with a stillness and a steadiness that seemed completely out of place on a child's face. He wore oversized dusty sandals and a yellow t-shirt that had been washed so many times the color had nearly given up entirely. But his eyes were sharp and clear and utterly unafraid. Jerry felt his temper flare. He was a man who got cornered for favors constantly, and he had learned to cut it off quickly. "Listen, son," he said, his voice carrying the particular tiredness of someone who's been managing people for decades. "My security is right there by the car. Move along. I'm not doing charity today." The boy didn't flinch, didn't look at the guards, didn't take a single step back. He took one step forward instead, and when he spoke, his voice was calm and deliberate in a way that cut right through the park noise like a blade through paper. "Your daughter isn't sick, sir," the boy said. His English was precise and clear. Jerry went still. "And she isn't going blind." The annoyance in Jerry's chest evaporated instantly, replaced by something colder and stranger. "What did you just say?" "They say she's losing her sight," the boy continued, his eyes moving briefly to Maya with an expression of sorrow that was far too heavy for a 10-year-old's face. But it's a lie. Someone inside your house is slowly taking her light away. Jerry felt the anger surge back, hot and defensive, the anger of a father being told something his mind was not ready to accept from a direction it was not prepared to receive it. He was about to snap back, demand to know who sent him, threaten consequences. Then the boy said the next sentence. "It's your wife, sir. The one with the red hair. She puts something in the little girl's food. Every single day." The world went quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of a peaceful afternoon. The suffocating quiet of something cracking open. Jerry sat completely still as the memories started hitting him fast and without mercy. Victoria, his beautiful, composed second wife, who had stepped into this broken household after Maya's mother passed and genuinely seemed, to be exactly what they needed. She had been warm, attentive, fiercely protective of Maya's routine. Maybe too fiercely. He remembered when the symptoms started. The stomach aches first. Then fatigue. Then the vision. And he remembered, with a clarity that made him feel suddenly sick, that Maya's eyes always seemed worse right after dinner. He remembered Victoria insisting on cooking Maya's meals herself. "You can't trust the house staff with a sick child, Jerry," she'd say. "Let me handle her food. It's my duty." He looked at the boy again. Searching hard for the calculation of someone running a scam, the flicker of someone who'd been paid to deliver a message. He didn't find it. What he found instead were the eyes of a child who had witnessed something that haunted him and had made a choice, a dangerous, costly choice, to speak up anyway. "Why are you saying this?" Jerry asked, his voice dropping. "Do you know who I am? Do you know what can happen to you for making accusations like this about my family?" The boy nodded. "I know you're Chief Williams. I clean the high windows at the back of your house in Banana Island. The security men let me do it for a little money. I see things because rich people never look down." Jerry's grip on the bench tightened until his knuckles went pale. Those windows looked directly into the kitchen. "What did you see?" he whispered. The boy looked at his feet for just a moment. Then back up. "I saw Madame Victoria. In the evenings she sends everyone out of the kitchen. Then she opens a small silver locket she wears around her neck and shakes a white powder into the little girl's soup. I saw her do it yesterday. And the week before. And the week before that." A cold wave of nausea moved through Jerry from his chest outward. The silver locket. Victoria wore it every single day. Never took it off. Told him it held her grandmother's ashes when he asked. He had never once questioned it. The sound of gravel crunching behind him made him go rigid. "Jerry, darling." He turned slowly. Victoria was walking toward them across the path, stunning in a silk dress, designer sunglasses perched on her head. She looked perfect. She always looked perfect, until her eyes landed on the boy standing next to her husband. Then something shifted behind her expression. The smile that appeared was a fraction of a second too late, and her eyes were moving back and forth between Jerry and the boy with a speed that had nothing to do with curiosity. That was fear doing the math. "Jerry, what's going on?" Her voice came out just a little too high, a little too controlled. "Who is this child? Why is he so close to Maya? You know how fragile she is right now." Jerry stood up slowly. The dizziness that had been sitting behind his eyes for weeks was suddenly gone, replaced by something sharp and cold and absolutely focused. He looked at his wife. Really looked at her. And for the first time, he saw past the image. The perfect clothes, the perfect composure, the perfect role she had constructed, to the stranger wearing it all like a costume. "This boy," Jerry said, his voice flat and precise, "was telling me a very interesting story, Victoria." She scoffed, reaching for Maya's hand, and Jerry shifted his body slightly, just enough, to block her. "Honey, please. These street kids are professionals at this." "Guards," she called out, her voice cracking just slightly at the edges. "Remove this child from my husband's side." "I'm not begging," the boy said, loudly and calmly. "I saw you through the window. The powder from the locket. You put it in her soup." Victoria stepped back like she'd been physically struck. "He's lying, Jerry. You cannot seriously be standing there listening to this." He's making it up for money. But Jerry wasn't listening to her words anymore. He was watching her hands. Victoria, the woman who had sat perfectly composed through corporate scandals, through public controversies, through crisis after crisis without ever losing her steady, unshakable cool, was standing in front of him right now with both hands trembling violently at her sides. And then, almost involuntarily, her hand moved up to touch the silver locket at her throat. The moment her fingers made contact with the metal, she yanked them away like she'd been burned. Jerry saw it. The guilt. The confirmation that lives not in what a person says, but in the thing they can't control when the truth is right there in the room. He turned to the boy. "What's your name?" "Jonah," the boy said. Jerry reached into his jacket, pulled out a gold-embossed business card, and pressed it into the boy's hand. "Jonah, stay in this park. I am sending a car back for you in 1 hour. If you stay, I will change your life. If you run, I will find you." Jonah just nodded. The drive back to Banana Island was suffocating. Maya slept against her father's chest, completely unaware that her world had just detonated around her. Victoria sat on the opposite side of the SUV, staring out the window, jaw set, hands still shaking in her lap despite everything she was doing to control them. When they pulled through the mansion gates, Jerry moved fast and precisely. He had one priority above everything else: don't let her near the evidence. "Take Maya to her room," he told the nanny the second they walked into the marble foyer. "Nobody feeds her. Not even water. Understand?" The nanny nodded and disappeared upstairs, reading the look on his face correctly. Victoria tried to regroup. "Jerry, I'm going to make Maya's evening soup. She needs her strength." "Stay away from the kitchen," Jerry said, his voice carrying absolute zero. "Go to the guest room." She screamed. Accused him of losing his mind over a beggar's lies. Threatened to call her lawyer. He let her scream. He posted guards at the guest room door and walked alone into the kitchen. He found the pink flask Victoria used exclusively for Maya's meals, unscrewed the top, and poured a careful sample into a glass jar. Then he dialed a private number, a toxicologist he trusted completely, the kind of man who asked no questions and ran every test available. "Dr. Mike," Jerry said. "I have a sample. Full toxin screen. Right now. I don't care what it costs." He hung up and stood at the kitchen window for a long moment, the same window Jonah had looked through. He thought about a child standing out there in the dark, watching something evil happen, and making a choice that cost him every bit of safety he didn't have. Jonah arrived at the mansion exactly an hour later. He walked into the study and sat in a leather armchair that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and he looked around the room not with wonder but with the careful, measured awareness of someone who has learned that beautiful places can hide the most dangerous things. "The woman with the red hair is angry," Jonah noted flatly. "I can hear her shouting through the door from here." "Let her shout," Jerry said, leaning forward. "Jonah, I need you to think carefully. When you watched Victoria through the window, was she ever with anyone? Did she ever speak to anyone while she was preparing the food?" Jonah's face scrunched in concentration. "She was usually alone. But there is a woman who visits. Glasses. White car. The doctor." Jerry's blood turned to ice water. Dr. Helen, the renowned specialist who had diagnosed Maya, who had prescribed the imported eye drops that never seemed to help, who had sat across from Jerry in her pristine office and delivered the verdict in the calm, authoritative tone of someone who had seen this condition many times before. "3 days ago," Jonah continued, "I was hiding near the back gate. The doctor came through the side entrance. Madame Victoria met her there. The doctor handed her a small brown envelope and said," Jonah paused, clearly recalling the exact words. She said, "This is the last batch. If you use more than a pinch, her heart will stop before the blindness is permanent, and the autopsy will catch it." Then Madame Victoria gave the doctor a thick envelope of cash. They hugged. Jerry had to grab the edge of his desk. The doctor. The diagnosis. The prescription that wasn't medicine at all but a second weapon timed to interact with the first. The entire illness had been manufactured from the beginning, designed by someone with medical expertise, carried out by someone with daily access, covered by a diagnosis that explained every symptom perfectly. His phone rang. "Dr. May." He put it on speaker. Chief Williams. The toxicologist's voice was tight with controlled urgency. I ran mass spectrometry on the broth sample. What I found, this is deliberate and sophisticated. The broth contains a slow-acting neurotoxin derived from heavy metals mixed with a rare botanical compound. It targets the optic nerve first, replicating the progression of macular degeneration almost exactly. But if combined with the specific chemical compounds in standard prescription eye drops. Her heart would stop, Jerry finished, his voice hollow. Correct. It would present as sudden cardiac arrest caused by the stress of her condition. Chief, whoever formulated this has serious medical training. This is not something you find on the street. This is a masterclass in killing someone without leaving obvious fingerprints. Is there an antidote? Yes. Because you caught it before the final systemic collapse, we can flush her system with chelation therapy. I'm dispatching a private medical team to your location right now with the 4 drips needed. Chief Williams, your daughter is going to be fine. Jerry set the phone down on the desk. The crushing weight that had lived in his chest for 6 months, that slow, grinding pressure of watching his child suffer and being completely powerless to stop it, lifted all at once. And what replaced it was something burning and focused and absolute. He looked at Jonah across the desk. This boy, this 10-year-old child who lived on the streets and cleaned windows for change and had every single reason to stay quiet and keep his head down, had just single-handedly dismantled a murder conspiracy designed by adults with money and education and resources. Jonah, Jerry said, and his voice broke slightly. You saved her. You saved my little girl. Before he could say another word, the intercom on his desk erupted. Mrs. Roa, the head housekeeper, voice sharp with panic. Chief, Madam Victoria tricked the guards. She's broken out of the guest room. She's heading for the front door. And Dr. Helen's car just pulled into the driveway. Jerry was on his feet before the sentence finished. Lock down the entire estate. Nobody leaves. Nobody. He left Jonah under the protection of his personal bodyguard and sprinted down the grand staircase, reaching the foyer just as Victoria was frantically working the locks on the front doors. Through the glass panels he could see Dr. Helen walking calmly up the front steps, medical bag in hand, completely unaware that the game was already over. The security team swarmed. 2 guards intercepted Dr. Helen at the porch and brought her inside, her protests filling the marble foyer. Her medical bag hit the floor. Victoria stood frozen against the door, the escape plan collapsed around her, her face drained of everything except pure trapped animal panic. The expensive makeup couldn't cover it. Nothing could cover it now. Jerry, please, she stammered, her voice shaking in a way it never had in all the years he'd known her. You're making a terrible mistake. Dr. Helen is here for Maya's checkup. Jerry walked down the remaining steps slowly, each footfall echoing through the foyer. He crossed to the medical bag on the floor, unzipped it, and turned it upside down. Stethoscope, prescription pads, and rolling across the marble floor, several small, unlabeled vials of clear liquid. A checkup, Jerry said quietly. Or the final dose, Helen? The one that stops her heart tonight. Dr. Helen's face went completely white. Her mouth opened. No words came. She looked at Victoria, one single terrified glance, and in that glance, without a single word spoken, every piece of the conspiracy confirmed itself. Sometimes silence is the loudest confession in the room. Jerry turned his gaze to his wife. He thought about the vows she had spoken, about the way she had held Maya when the child was sick and frightened, stroked her hair, whispered reassurances. About all the times he had looked at her and felt grateful, genuinely grateful, that this woman had chosen to love his daughter. He understood now what that performance had cost her, what it had required her to sustain every single day, while she poisoned the child she was pretending to mother. Look me in the eyes, Victoria, Jerry said, stepping close enough that she couldn't avoid his gaze. Swear on your life that you never knowingly harmed my daughter. The silence that answered was the longest of Jerry's life. And then the tears came. Real tears this time, but not the tears of someone broken by grief. The tears of someone watching everything they built on lies collapse inward all at once. I did it for us, Victoria whispered, her voice crumbling. I was scared. You gave her everything in the will. I would have been left with nothing. I only used small amounts. I just needed her out of the way so we could have our own future, our own children. Jerry stepped back. The last chain of restraint inside him went slack, not into rage, but into something colder. A profound, nauseating clarity. It was never love, he said, his voice unsteady but certain. It was only ever control and greed. Then a small voice came from the top of the staircase. That is my mother. Every single person in the foyer froze. Jerry turned. Jonah had come out of the study and was standing at the top of the stairs, one trembling finger pointed directly at Victoria. His face was wet with tears, but his voice hadn't wavered. Victoria staggered backward. No. No, it cannot be. Jerry looked between the boy and his wife, completely lost. Jonah, what are you talking about? Jonah walked down the stairs slowly, his eyes fixed on the silver locket resting against Victoria's chest. When he spoke, his voice was quiet and steady and absolutely devastating. When I was very small, we lived in a village in Enugu. My mother left me with my grandmother. She said she was going to the city to find a rich man so we could have a better life. She said she would come back for me. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs and looked directly at the glamorous, trembling woman in front of him. She left me a photograph of herself wearing that exact silver locket. But she never came back. My grandmother died. I came to Lagos to survive. I didn't recognize your face at first, the makeup, the hair. But I recognized the locket through the window. His voice cracked for the first time. I thought if I watched you, maybe I would see the mother who loved me. Instead, I watched you try to kill a little girl for money. The foyer went completely silent. The security guards who had seen and heard things that would make most people flinch looked away. Even in that room, among hardened people, what had just been spoken was too much to absorb standing upright. Victoria collapsed onto her knees, her face buried in her hands, sobs tearing out of her in ugly, uncontrolled waves. She had left her own child on the side of the road to chase a wealthy life. And that child, living as a street beggar outside the very mansion she had purchased with a dead woman's inheritance, had become the single person responsible for dismantling everything she had built. She had been completely blind to the real treasure. And there was no crueler justice in the world. Police sirens grew louder outside, cutting through the exclusive, tree-lined quiet of the neighborhood. Barrister Johnson had done exactly what he was asked. Victoria and Dr. Helen didn't resist when the officers came through the doors. They were led out into the flashing red and blue of the Lagos night, and the chapter of their lives defined by cruelty and greed closed behind them like a cell door. Jerry knelt down in front of Jonah so they were eye to eye. You saved my daughter's life today, he said, his voice barely holding together. You walked into a place that had every reason to ignore you and you told the truth anyway. That took more courage than anything I've done in a boardroom in 30 years. Jonah wiped his face with the back of his hand. Where do I go now? He asked quietly. I don't have a corner anymore. Jerry shook his head, and for the first time in 6 months, a genuine smile broke across his exhausted face. You're not going back to the streets. You saved my family. Now you're going to be part of it. A home. A future. You will never be invisible again. Upstairs, Dr. Mike's medical team worked through the night. By morning, the toxins were being systematically cleared from Maya's small body. The warm golden light of sunrise came through the bedroom windows, catching the dust motes floating in the air and turning them briefly into something that looked almost like sparks. Jerry sat on the edge of Maya's bed, holding her hand. Jonah was asleep on the sofa across the room, wrapped in a blanket thicker and softer than anything he'd ever felt against his skin. Maya blinked slowly, focused, looked around the room, at the wallpaper, at the monitors, at her father's face. Then the biggest, most breathtaking smile spread across her lips. Daddy, she whispered, I can see you. It's not dark anymore. Jerry pulled his daughter into his arms and held her like a man who has been standing at the edge of an unthinkable loss and has just been pulled back from it by a 10-year-old boy in a faded yellow t-shirt. He looked over at Jonah sleeping peacefully across the room. A child the world had made invisible. A child who had every reason to keep his head down and keep walking and let other people's problems stay other people's problems. Instead, he had looked through a kitchen window and chosen to speak. And that choice, that one small, dangerous, costly act of courage from a boy with nothing to his name, had saved everything. Here's what Chief Jeremiah Williams learned that night, and what I want to leave with you. Real power has nothing to do with what's in your bank account. Real protection has nothing to do with the number of guards standing by your car. There are things that all the money and influence in the world simply cannot buy. The willingness of one honest person to stand up and tell the truth when staying silent would be so much easier and so much safer. And sometimes, the most important voice in the room is the one nobody thought to listen to. Jonah didn't have credentials, didn't have a title, didn't have anything except clear eyes and a conscience he refused to quiet. And that was enough to change everything. If this story meant something to you, I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me, have you ever been in a moment where speaking up felt impossible, but you did it anyway? Or maybe someone else's courage changed your life when you least expected it? Drop it below because those stories matter. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because there are more stories like this one coming, and every single one of them is worth your time. I'll see you in the next one.